is Citizen Weekend with Olive Ballows.
There appears to have been a change of tone. Only yesterday, President William Ruto admonished Catholic bishops to be factual, lest they be considered liars in the same way they accused his administration. Then we had actually four quote-unquote adversaries in the same function. We've dubbed it the Summit of Adversaries. We have all that coming up, including a conversation on climate change. And I will be joined tonight by Fred Njehu, who is a Pan-African political strategist for Greenpeace Africa. And I will be joined by Nicholas Abuya as well. And he is the Global Program Resilience Advisor, Christian Aid. We ask the question, what, if anything, should we expect from COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan? We also have a special report compiled by none other than Mashrima Kapombe, who is on location. We begin, as is the custom, with the highlights.
Vile wametusaidisha kwamba kuna makosa hapa na pale. Hiyo makosa tutarekebisha.
We have heard you. President William Ruto says his government will seek to address shortcomings pointed out by Catholic bishops. A gathering of friends and foes. President William Ruto, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki and ousted Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua meet at the consecration of Bishop Peter Kimani in Embu. End of a journey. Thousands turn up for burial of self-proclaimed prophetess Mary Akatsa in Kawangware. Facing ruin, hundreds of cage fish farmers in Busia demand government compensation to help address losses suffered earlier this year. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Yula Nzale. President William Ruto now says he has heard the concerns by the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops and will remedy shortcomings that the clergy raised when they accused his government of entrenching a culture of lies in the country. Speaking during the consecration service of Bishop Peter Kimani as the new head of the Embu Diocese, the president had a rough time explaining some of his government's programs in matters of affordable housing and social health authority. Emmanuel too with the details of the president's change of tune.
It was a rare opportunity that brought together President William Ruto, his deputy Professor Kithure Kindiki, retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, and ousted Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua after the high-octane politics in the country in the recent past that have triggered far-reaching changes in government, as the ranking leaders attended the episcopal ordination and installation of Bishop Peter Kimani as the fourth bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Embu at the University of Embu grounds. And just hours after blasting the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops for allegedly misleading the country, the president recounted a turbulent week where he engaged the church leadership on their harsh verdict of his administration.
Nilipata salamu kutoka maaskofu wetu ya barua. So mimi nafikiri ndio nikamilishe kesho, nafikiri nitatafuta mahali ya kwenda ibada ya Jumapili katika kanisa Katoliki ndio iwe complete.
Ruto making an about turn on his sentiments made on Friday at the Tangaza University, promising to change his ways.
Na niwahakikishia maaskofu wetu, vile wametusaidisha kwamba kuna makosa hapa na pale, hiyo makosa tutarekebisha kwa sababu universal health coverage is a must-do. Because indeed it will make the difference and make sure no citizen is left behind.
He, however, ran into some headwinds as he tried to answer some of the questions that had been raised by the bishops.
Niwachia ile kazi ya affordable housing. Mimi sasa nasukumana na hiyo affordable
crowd having none of the success stories of the affordable housing projects.
Tunajenga nyumba 1160 tayari imetolea sehemu tofauti katika taifa letu la Kenya.
And the seemingly disgruntled congregation extending their cold reception of the President's Universal Healthcare Project scorecard.
Katika mambo ya matibabu, jana tunazungumza mambo ya matibabu ya Universal Health Coverage. Hata mimi nikitoka hapa saa hizi, mimi nitapitia kwa hospitali.
The president concluding with a rallying call for unity in the country.
Tuungane, tuweke umoja na tupange vile nchi yetu ya Kenya itasonga mbele.
And I plead with the church to continue praying for our country, that we may live in peace, harmony. We may have a secure country so that we can be able to worship God and raise our families in the country that God gave all of us.
The bishops had on Thursday accused President Ruto of entrenching a culture of lies and unkept promises, while at the same time overtaxing Kenyans who are grappling with the high cost of living.
This culture of lies, unkept promises, and misplaced priorities is unacceptable and needs to be dealt with.
With the government coming out guns blazing in defense of the president. Today's change of tone indicating, at least publicly, a willingness to address the issues raised. The execution, however, without clarity. Emmanuel To, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta says leaders must respect citizens to earn the respect of those they lead. The former president, who has kept away from public events after handing over power, made a notable return to the spotlight in Embu during the episcopal ordination and installation of Bishop Peter Kimani. The former president, a Catholic, called for greater unity within the country. Belita Olatenges reports.
It was a firm return to the public limelight after a long lull, a period of quiet despite the political turbulence that has shaken the country's political arena. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta coming face to face with President William Ruto more than a year after he fiercely condemned him for ordering a raid on his son's home in Karen. He appeared in high spirits as he attended the ordination of Reverend Peter Kimani as the Bishop of Embu Diocese, who he referred to as a close friend. The congregation erupted in cheers as he took to the podium. Perhaps not only a reconnection, but also a testament to the enduring influence he still holds in the region. Uhuru spoke about the strong bond he shares with Bishop Peter Kimani.
My friend, my Lord Bishop, unajua sasa hata kama wanakukaribisha hapa, mimi nimepoteza rafiki, siwezi kuwa na mtu nitakuwa tukicheka na yeye. Sasa namuogopa kwa sababu najua amepandishwa cheo. Anaweza kufunga maombi huko juu.
The former president calling for national unity, urging leaders to respect citizens if they expect to be respected in return.
Tuombee amani. Tuombee uwiano kati ya viongozi na wananchi. Tuache mambo ya ukabila na kuchokana. Sisi wote ni Wakenya.
Uhuru steering clear of the ongoing political developments in the country that have sparked the beginning of realignments, but making a confession of sorts of his awareness of current affairs, saying he was but an observer.
Na Kenya haiwezi kufaulu watu wakiwa na utengemano, wakiwa wakipiana maneno, wakiwa hawaheshimiani. Vile tumesema bishopu hawaheshimu, nyinyi mtarudisha hiyo. Viongozi pia mheshimu wananchi na watarudisha hiyo.
He took a subtle swipe at politicians over the intolerance with the church.
Anakuhakikishia mimi sitaleta siasa kwa kanisa, mimi kuja mchango tu ama yale mengine utakuwa ni.
The former president telling the gathering of clergymen and Embu residents that he was averse to noise, perhaps a subtle hint.
Mimi Mheshimiwa Rais akimaliza kuongea mimi nitatoroka. Mambo ya speed hii na makelele siwezi siku hizi na
Uhuru Kenyatta's return to the public limelight happens at a time when the president's standing in the Mount Kenya region is shaky, informing a general feeling nationwide that the country is not headed in the right direction and recent political happenings. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV.
The Catholic Church's ordination and installation of a bishop in Embu provided the forum for a gathering of adversaries. The president meeting his predecessor and his former deputy, whose ouster he orchestrated, and Deputy President Kithure Kindiki meeting his former boss, who endorsed his impeachment as Senate Majority Leader, and his predecessor, who took his first chance at being deputy, only to lose it himself and create a path through the office that had caused serious division in the run-up to the 2022 presidential election. Ayub Abdikadir takes a look at the summit of adversaries.
A handshake heavy with symbolism, a president, a former deputy president, and a serving deputy president gathered at the same venue, complete with commensurate security protection. For Ruto and Kenyatta, the duo who held starkly different visions only 2 years ago, it was their first meeting in public since November 2022.
Therefore, 3 times higher.
A short distance away, a former deputy president removed from office a month ago, sandwiched between members of the public, far from the trappings of power, whose entrance into the venue was low-key, unidentifiable only with his former boss, President William Ruto, by his blazer. Not his former boss, William Ruto, nor his other former boss and Ruto's predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta, nor his successor, Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki, acknowledged his presence. His only grace coming from the Nyeri Archdiocese Archbishop Anthony Muheria.
I would also like at this moment also to recognize our former Deputy President.
And a befitting applause from the congregation.
Najua mimi sasa siku hizi mimi sina mastori mingi.
For Uhuru Kenyatta, even in retirement, it was apparent he is not disengaged.
Mimi naangalianga tu TV.
His successor, whose key projects have been running against a wave of public opposition, speaking somewhat glowingly of what his government is undertaking.
Kiongozi wetu aliyestaafu Rais Uhuru Kenyatta, ile kazi uliniwachia mimi nang'ang'ana nayo mbaya sana. Nasukuma kusukuma.
Out of the Catholic ordination mass emerged images for the ages of adversaries past and present gathered together in a reflection of the ever-fluid political happenings that have become the hallmark of the political class in the country. Ayub Abdikadir, Citizen TV.
Self-proclaimed prophetess Mary Akatsa has been buried in a funeral ceremony attended by thousands of her faithful and residents of Kawangware 56. The late Akatsa courted controversy by her so-called miracles in her church by conducting weddings between the living and the dead and claiming that Jesus visited her church back in 1988. Gatete Njoroge has more. More than 300 cage fish farmers in Busia County are calling on the national and county governments to fulfill their compensation pledge following the mass death of fish in their cages in October. The farmers say they had implemented some of the recommendations floated by scientists, which included moving their cages farther ashore to minimize chances of death by suffocation. As Laura Otieno reports, the affected farmers have been unable to restock the cages and are slowly watching their source of livelihood drift farther away. With Laura Otieno reports, the affected farmers have been unable to restock the cages and are slowly watching their source of livelihood drift farther away with every passing day.
For the last 2 months, Molokoba Beach in Busia County has been turning into a ghost area slowly. Only a handful of business people are present here, an indication of the declining state of business following the mass death of fish in cages in Lake Victoria in October. The floating cages remain empty. Fish farmers say the 9.5 million shillings compensation bundle promised by the CS for Mining and Blue Economy and the Busia County government is yet to materialize.
Ile resolution ya mkutano tulikuwa nao walisema hiyo restocking, hiyo compensation itakuwa immediately. But so far immediate bado tujaona any response so far. So tujui kama ni soon, ni leo, ni kesho ama ni lini.
County government na national government kwa nini hawezi kuchukua haya majukumu? Wajue tu mwananchi vile alikuwa akiumia, wamrudishie, wamfadhili vile alikuwa amesema ili turudi pale tusaidie wananchi wetu. Tunaumia, naombea haki tunaumia.
In a report released by the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Institute, the massive deaths were caused by a scientific phenomenon that also led to suffocation due to water currents changing in the lake. Kemfree had issued a raft of recommendations, including moving the cages into deeper waters where chances of suffocation will be minimal, spacing of the cages, as well as setting up of cold chain facilities to enable storage of fish. Despite some of the farmers moving the cages, they remain stranded due to lack of capital.
Watu wamekosa kazi, wamama ambao walikuwa wanafanya biashara ya samaki pia saizi wamekosa samaki. Na ilikuwa imepunguza pressure katika bahari kwa sababu watu wengi wavuvi walikuwa wakiingia baharini, wengine walikuwa sasa wamerudi, wameandikwa kazi hapa. Tangu hiyo janga ifanyike, sasa watu wamekuwa na shida, samaki hakuna.
Cases of massive fish kills were also reported across Rudacho Beach in Busia and a section of beaches in Kisumu and Homa Bay counties due to the changing currents that affect Lake Victoria. Laura Otieno, Citizen TV.
We'll come back to that report by Gatete Njoroge on Mary Akatsa later. Before then, the Safaricom Sambaza Furaha Caravan, in partnership with Royal Media Services, continued its nationwide tour of celebrating 24 years of service. The Rift Valley leg concluded in Nakuru on its 6th day, with Kenyans receiving various Christmas gifts as the caravan prepares to head to central Kenya next week. Willy Lusige has more.
The Safaricom caravan known as Safaricom Sambaza Furaha concluded the Rift Valley leg in Nakuru County after a 6-day tour. Along the way, fans won big.
Tumepatiana mbuzi wengi sana, tumepatiana kuku wengi sana, tumepatiana shopping ya Christmas.
Na tunashukuru zaidi kwa udhamini wa Safaricom katika maadhimisho ya miaka 24 nasi pia vile vile katika kuwashukuru na kuzawadi wasikilizaji wetu, naweza nikasema kwamba umekuwa ni msafara wa kufana.
The tour also aimed to educate Kenyans on the importance of protecting their personal data to avoid fraud during the Christmas season.
Ndio tumesema tukisherehekea kuwa miaka 24 lazima tuje kwa ground tuwe nanyi nyote.
Next week the caravan will head to central Kenya.
Na sherekea miaka 24 ya Safaricom na pia miaka 24 ya Royal Media Services. So partnership yetu imekuwa there for a very long time and we are going to go throughout the country kusambaza furaha. Christmas inaanza mapema.
The central leg will cover areas including Kenol, Kangema, Othaya, Karatina, Nyeri, Embu and Mwea.
Na sasa watu wa mlima nikuambia tunakuja netoka ado nyumba. Tunaanza Jumatatu hapo Murang'a, Kenol, tutaenda Meru na Muga, tutakuwa na Inoro TV and radio, tutakuwa na Wemwaro upande wa Embu. Tutakuwa na Citizen Radio. Wewe sikiza tu radio yako ama uangalie TV yako ama uangalie platform zetu za digital na za Safaricom, utajua pale tunaenda.
As the first week of Sambaza Furaha na Safaricom caravan comes to the end here in the Rift Valley region, Kenyans have been called to turn out in large numbers as the caravan now heads to the second week in the mountain region, popularly known as the central region of the Kenya. Willy Lusige, Citizen TV, Keringet, Nakuru County.
We take a break, but we have plenty coming up, including my interview with Fred Njehu, Pan-African political strategist, and that is for Greenpeace Africa. We also have in studio Nicholas Abuya, and he is the Global Program Resilience Ambassador for Christian Aid. So do stay tuned. COP29, broken agreements, compensation disputes, and the lack of a clear way forward in addressing climate change. We discuss this after the break.
As a parent, you want your little one to experience all that life offers. To touch the world with an open heart and curious mind. But the world, for all its beauty, holds unseen dangers. Germs, bacteria, tiny threats, waiting on every surface.
Detrix protects you and your family from disease-causing germs.
That's why I choose Detrix.
Allowing the freedom to be yourself all day long.
Detrix, endorsed by Kenya Progressive Mass Association. Bidhaa bora kutoka Pwani Oil Limited. Detrix Aloe Vera.
These days, you have to shop smart as everything is so expensive. I shop smart. I always get a good bargain when I buy my mbogas from Mama Chege. I shop smart. I buy the 1 kg of Msafi, which costs the same as 500 grams of a popular detergent. I shop smart. Msafi removes tough stains and keeps clothes bright. And its pleasant fragrance keeps clothes smelling fresh. Chaguo smart, value maradufu, na Msafi.
This December, PCEA Kirarapon marks 100 years of faith, community and impact as the first Presbyterian church in Maasai land. Join us this Sunday, 17th November from 9 a.m. at PCEA Kirarapon Church at Kirarapon Drive 21 as we celebrate our shared journey and the future ahead. The event is free and open to all. Come celebrate with us. For inquiries, call this number. Don't miss this once-in-a-lifetime occasion, supported by Royal Media Services.
Lakini vile hii ekonomi imetufinya, ilinibidi kubadilisha sabuni nikatumia ingine rahisi. Bala, ilibidi nioshe kila kitu mara 2. Sikuwa na otherwise, nikarudia Ariel.
Ariel, usafi bora kwa mwosho mmoja tu.
Dial *811*404# to get Jesus Paid It All as your skiza tune.
Habibi, twende Dubai na View Travel. Relax na Dao cruise along the Dubai Creek. Enjoy an exciting half-day city tour, a desert safari with a barbecue dinner. Now, uji treat to a shopping spree at the Dubai malls. All this and more in 5 days, starting from $680 per person sharing. Book now and lipa pole pole. Angukia deals motomoto na View Travel. Visit viewtravel.com, call or WhatsApp 0703-254-254. View Travel. Dream, explore, discover.
Get ready because AirAsia is taking you there. With over 130 destinations, there's always somewhere new to explore. And with fly-through via Kuala Lumpur, it's all just one seamless trip away. Snorkeling in Langkawi, diving in Bali, or road tripping in Sydney? We got you. So, where to next? Fly through with AirAsia now.
Shalom, everybody. My name is Pastor Wilfred Lai. I'm the lead pastor of Jesus Celebration Center in Mombasa. I want to welcome every one of you to our Leaders Conference. This is the 32nd year of Word Explosion. This conference trains pastors and church leaders to do the work of the ministry. The conference will start on the 2nd of December to the 8th. We have ministers covering the fivefold ministries who will be speaking during the conference. Your life will never be the same.
HF Group's rights issue is here, and we invite all our shareholders to participate. For over 60 years, HF Group has been at the heart of enriching the lives of Kenyans. Since independence, we've empowered thousands of Kenyans to achieve their dreams of home ownership. Today, we're doing even more. HF Group is a company with a wide spectrum of offerings to suit all your banking, property, and insurance needs. It's time for our next chapter, and we invite you to be part of it through our rights issue. This initiative aims to bring in investments that will power our growth, enabling us to accelerate value creation for all our stakeholders. Through this investment, we aim to achieve greater efficiency through advanced technologies, expand our business capabilities, fuel new product innovations, and build shared prosperity. The road ahead is bright, and we invite you to be part of this journey. Invest with us by investing in us. The offer opens on Wednesday, 13th November and closes on Monday, 9th December 2024. For more information, consult your stockbroker or investment bank or visit hfgroup.co.ke. HF Group, dreams made possible.
Great yummy taste, gotta hack it. I spread bread, but in go gotta pack it. Napaka nyweki design ya mokoro. Blue band, Juni natural cocoa. 5 vitamins, una grow plus ni tam na ni Tuna hack snack na ki blue band choco for your growth.
Do you mean like a mistress?
Mistress, girlfriend, backdoor, spare wheel, whatever.
I tried hard to bring justice, but I ended up hurting Nicolas.
Dajukiz, mama yako alikufundisha kupika, na mimi nikakufundisha kuendesha gari. Gari hili ni lako.
Soko, more than a meal.
Your skin naturally connects with nature and recognizes the goodness of native ingredients, which is why AfriSense Toning Bathing Bar is packed with African ingredients. AfriSense, discover the secrets of African beauty for your skin.
Thank you for staying with us on Citizen Weekend. We head to Mombasa, where business operators have opposed the proposed Mombasa County Finance Bill, claiming that no public participation was conducted. They accuse the county government of Mombasa of implementing new charges before they're approved by the county assembly. Francis Mtalaki has more.
A section of Mombasa business operators staged a peaceful protest at the Tononoka Social Hall, rejecting the newly introduced 2024 Mombasa Finance Bill. They claim that the county had already implemented the new charges even before being passed by the county assembly.
We were paying 30,000. Now we are paying 150, 110, and others 77. For single business permit, we were paying 22,500. For now, it is 40,000. And yet, we were coming to discuss this bill, which has already been implemented. I personally have gone to the county offices to pay for medicals and the liquor clearance. They have hiked. We are coming to discuss a bill which is already implemented. So we wonder who is footing who.
Kilio chetu biashara yazifanyika na venye Mombasa County inataka. As much as hatuwezi fanya biashara bila kulipa ushuru, lakini walete reasonable charges, we'll comply with it. Ukiangalia sasa wanapata revenue kidogo. Not all of us we can comply, but when they lower the charges, watu wengi wataweza comply.
You find that we as the teachers, at first we were giving less than 30,000, but for now when you go through it, we are going to give out 50,000. few thousand shillings in a year. We've employed more than 30,000 per sub-county, the teachers that we've employed. But find that the amount we give is more than the amount we collect back in our schools.
Na tunalipia pia rent. Tunawaomba waweze kutuwekea vitu zote kwa pamoja, at least yule mtu akilipa like 10,000 anajua amemalizana na everything, rather than tulipe hapa, tulipe pale na nyingine pia tulipe kule kwingine. Tumepata loopholes mpaka wengine wanakuja wanaingilia kwa mashule.
The Public Participation Forum at Tononoka Social Hall aborted due to the absence of members of the county assembly. The business operators are now asking the county leadership to withdraw the charges, claiming that most of the taxes, including permits, have been increased by over 100%, a matter that will cripple their businesses.
These daycares unapata wengine wako na watoto kidogo na mahali wenye wanaishi wako naishi mahali duni. Kwa nini wasije wakaangalia ni jinsi gani ambavyo wanaweza kupunguza ili yule mwingine pia naye aweze kusurvive ndani ya Mombasa County?
Assembly na executive waongei lugha moja. Kuna gap hapa na hatujui, na sisi hatutaki kujua. Sisi ni wananchi na tunalipa ushuru. Wao wakae chini waangalie mambo yao. Otherwise this document tuna reject vile ilivyo kwa sababu these are things we've already discussed.
They now want the county government of Mombasa to halt the new charges until the public participation exercise is conducted and the settlement resolved. Francis Mtulaki, Citizen TV, Mombasa.
The first week of the climate change talks in Baku, Azerbaijan, has ended with a myriad of obstacles for the developing world. G77 nations rejected the draft text of the new collective quantified goal that stipulates a financing model that should have been fair for all. The Africa group of negotiators are, however, not relenting, even as some world leaders express doubt that the COP process will yield significant gains in the near future. Mashima Kapombe is in Baku and now gives us an overview of week 1 at the Conference of Parties.
A cloud of doubt hangs above the Baku City Stadium, the meeting point of world leaders and climate change stakeholders. A scathing letter by former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, former UN Climate Change Chief Christina Figueres, and former Ireland President Mary Robinson painting a picture of despair on the COP process. The letter expressing disappointment on the COP's slow-moving processes in a climate crisis that waits for no man or nation.
The Conference of Parties on Climate Change is in its 29th session, but a lack of cooperation amongst nations has stalled the much-needed progress required in reaching a climate finance agreement, achieving the 1.5 degrees centigrade goal and phasing out fossil fuels as stipulated in the Paris Agreement of 2015.
It's a gift of the God. Every natural resource, whether it's oil, gas, wind, sun, gold, silver, copper, all that are natural resources. And countries should not be blamed for having them and should not be blamed for bringing these resources to the market because the market needs them.
In our global economy, supply chain shocks raise costs everywhere. Decimated harvests push up food prices everywhere. Destroyed homes increase insurance premiums everywhere. And this is a story of avoidable injustice. The rich cause the problem, the poor pay the highest price.
The Africa group of negotiators expressing hope, but equally concerned that an agreement that is agreeable to all will be reached, as a third new collective quantified goal draft was presented Friday evening. But they are adamant that developing nations will not relent on their stand for a $1.3 trillion per year financing for climate change impacts. In a statement from the Africa group of negotiators, Ambassador Ali Mohammed said, and I quote, "We are not here to secure just any deal, but one that ensures the most vulnerable nations receive the support they need to cope with and mitigate climate change impacts. We need a deal that addresses finance, technology transfer, loss and damage, and ensures robust accountability for promises made." End of quote.
The one that was there earlier was very much imbalanced and did not take into consideration the issues of developing world and the issues of Africa.
We must reform the multilateral development banks to unlock financing at scale
and to create incentives such as debt restructuring and sustainability, including the high cost of capital, borrowing, as well as scale and agility of climate finance.
The call comes in the wake of a second day of protests by civil society groups who want rich nations to pay for the damages caused by their actions over the years.
We need to set a goal, and a goal that is informed by the felt needs of our communities on the ground.
So as we go into week 2, and we expect that our ministers will be able to take that on board, and we are going to brief them as soon as they resume the high level on week 2 of our concerns from the African group of negotiators.
And as a back and forth amongst nations continues, the COP takes a rest Sunday.
And some are holding on to a glimmer of hope that an agreement will be reached at the last minute, as has been in previous sessions. But the impact of a last-minute resolution is what has left progress in limbo. Mashirima Kapombe, Citizen TV, Baku, Azerbaijan.
All right, and Mashima sets the stage for a conversation tonight. As I've mentioned repeatedly, we are joined by Fred Njehu, who is a Pan-African political strategist for Greenpeace Africa. He joins us virtually from Baku, Azerbaijan. I also have in the studio Nicholas Abuya, who is a Global Program Resilience Advisor, Christian Aid. Good to have you gentlemen join me tonight. I'll start with you, Fred. How optimistic should we be for a deal where the developed world supports poorer countries as far as climate mitigation is concerned? Currently, the figure is $100 billion per year, but that was what was agreed to in 2009, extended by the Paris Agreement to 2025. So now economists are saying we now need at least $1 trillion. US dollars contributed by the developed world a year. But then you have Donald Trump saying that countries like China and the UAE, which were classified as developing countries then, which are not contributing, and they're saying, in fact, he said he will pull out of the Paris Agreement. How optimistic should we be of a deal being struck?
Thank you, Olive. Thank you, Olive, for that question and for having me this evening. There has been quite a lot of political posturing, and time is running out for the negotiators to actually strike a deal going into the ministerial next week, where ministers will take over the negotiations. So the level of optimism is still low. There has been quite a lot of haggling between parties. Different proposals that have been brought on the table have not been agreed on. The text that we have is still very raw, and there's quite a number of thorny issues that needs to be ironed out. Countries haven't agreed on the contributor base. That's the countries that are supposed to provide the finances. But the Paris Agreement is quite clear, Article 9. You know, there is a principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, where developed countries have an obligation to actually provide the finances to the developing countries. So the design of the goal is bringing quite a lot of contention, as well as the quantum. What amount do we need to see going into COP29 and to COP30? Finally, of course, on that issue is the geopolitics. The U.S. elections, the outcome. And a scenario where the U.S. is likely to pull out of the Paris Agreement, that certainly brings a lot of complexity, because the U.S. Congress has to take like a year to actually ensure that process, goes through. Yeah.
All right. And, we're just looking at pictures of who are in attendance. In our case, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, represented Kenya. German's Chancellor did not attend, though he was expected to attend, Nick, because of what's happening with his government. And then we have not seen Joe Biden there. We have not seen Xi Jinping there. How optimistic should we be?
Well, thanks, Olive, for having me here. First of all, I would say that the presence of these politicians or head of states definitely would have sent a very strong political signal for the success of the COP29. So their absence definitely cast a dark shadow on that success. But definitely we can still remain optimistic that somewhat the negotiators who are at COP29 will have to reach a certain level of agreement, because a lot depends on this. Because when we look at how optimistic should we be, we put the question back that the success of this COP negotiation depends largely on the world prioritizing the needs of close to 4 billion people living in climate vulnerable countries, whose lives and livelihoods are at risk. So that's the bottom line, really. Yeah.
All right. Fred, what has been the effect of holding these talks in Azerbaijan? We had the president defend the fact that they're oil producers, saying they produce 0 point something of how much is produced globally, and yet the countries that produce the largest amount of oil have brought issue with it being a petro country, quote unquote, a petro country. Has that proven a distraction?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at the ambition that countries had last year in Dubai, that is to phase out the fossil fuel and transition into renewable energy solutions, that of course places host country in a very big dilemma, in as much as the transition is supposed to take a bit of time. And also it brings on board a lot of corporate lobbyists from the fossil fuel industries, who are largely responsible for the highest emissions, the greenhouse emissions. Over 80%, of the greenhouse emissions actually comes from the fossil fuel industries, and they bear the highest responsibility of providing a solution in terms of paying for the damages and paying for the climate destruction. So the host country, has quite a lot of responsibility chairing this COP and going into the next COP. And that's what we are seeing in terms of having a petro state hosting the COP.
All right. Also, we have climate deniers. So Argentina, for instance, their president withdrew their delegation. And also, what would be the effect of, I think he's the first leader that Trump has met since he was elected. Donald Trump himself is a climate denier. What impact will that have on these negotiations?
Well, these are political shifts which have got a bearing on these negotiations. And we cannot really keep a blind eye to them. But having said that, people like Trump and the president of Argentina, we cannot allow them to hold the world at hostage. That's the reality. Even in the USA itself, we've got millions of citizens who really want the planet to be saved from climate change. Yeah, we have got corporates from the US, many, who are pro a greener world, So having said that, I would say that we are not going to tie saving the planet to what happens at White House. I think that's very important for us to be very clear about it, that we are going to forge ahead, regardless of the opinion of Trump and his ally from Argentina or whoever will again emerge, because we're in a political landscape, so that we save the planet and the people who live in it. Because we only have one planet and we have got a responsibility to protect it.
Do you agree, Fred, because these are some of the largest emitters, and if there's no political commitment and he who pays the piper calls the tune, is it an exercise in futility? Fred?
Yeah, Nicholas is right, because if you look at the international community, the developed countries, the US, the EU, Japan, and other big countries, certainly they are the largest emitters. That's number one. They are highly responsible to provide the financing. And if you look at the way the financial architecture is designed, African countries just receive about 5% of the climate finance. That's quite very little. And much of it, or some of it, is actually, concessional loans that are quite expensive. And, look at the international interest rates, they are quite high, they are rising. But if you come back to the continent, the cost of adapting to climate crisis is quite high. Definitely, it's rising by the day. We are facing, extreme weather events that are linked to the climate change. So these countries cannot then come back and, block the negotiations and run away from the responsibility of providing the finances. The African group has placed a very ambitious proposal that's very grant-based public finance that, supposed to be split between mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, which, in this case is supposed to be negotiated and placed as one of the key demands for the continent. So we still push the developed countries to bear that responsibility, but most importantly, to make those commitments that they had made since the Paris Agreement.
All right, we've had a number of eminent persons write an open letter to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as well as the UNFCCC. So, is it FCCC?
Yes, it's UN.
Okay, so they say essentially that the COP process, as currently structured, is not fit for purpose. It is not the first time they have said so. What's your thinking, your response to that, Nick?
The COP process, Olive, is as its own imperfections. That is admitted. But the COP process is the only vehicle that we have to hold the polluters accountable. So when I saw the letter that was written by those eminent persons circulating yesterday night, basically I saw it as an honest, constructive feedback to improve on the COP process, but not to disband the COP process. Therefore, to a large extent, I would say that it is kind of a misinterpretation of what they intended to do. That is my view. Because without the COP, the world was at a risk of a global warming of up to above 5 degrees Celsius. But in the last decade or so, that is not the case, particularly with the submitted NDCs, in as much as they may not be ambitious enough to achieve the Paris Agreement goal as it were currently. And you can also appreciate that over time, we are now hearing more about investment in renewable energy, something which was not there before. Yes, it is imperfect, but we have made strides, and what that letter intended to achieve, basically, from my interpretation, is to provide honest feedback for rebooting the process, for it to be more effective and efficient in terms of shifting from more of negotiation to implementation. Thank you.
All right, that is what they're calling for. Yes. And then they say some of that means moving away from negotiation to implementation. One of the issues they also bring up in that open letter is hosting these conferences in countries that produce oil. The other issue that has come up is that there are more fossil fuel lobbyists at this COP than many of the delegations, including those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Fred, what do you make of that?
Well, quite a lot of distractions in terms of the presence of corporate lobbyists. Of course, they are pushing for an investment goal. They are there to strike deals, to actually, slow down the process of the negotiations, put pressure on their countries. But, the multilateral process is an international UN process. And this is a very democratic space where countries, sit down and put their negotiation demands on the table. They assess their priorities based on the regional blocks they come from, and of course negotiate a deal that has to be agreed upon. So their presence there, it's quite an exercise in futility. But we can't ignore the fact that they have to be part of the just transition away from the fossil fuels into the renewable energy sources. And the point I wanted to make here around that is that, if they are paying for the damages that they have caused, then that's supposed to bridge, the financial needs and then bridging the gap that we're trying to address. But most importantly, making energy investments a priority. The African continent only receives about 2 to 3% of the total investments in energy globally. And that's why we have, 600 million on average, Africans without access to, to energy. That's a glaring statistic. And we have to look at how do we press for energy investments to meet the energy demands and the growing populations of the continent.
All right. So part of what happened with this COP is that they've approved standards for international carbon markets. And I'll get to you, Fred, on that. But there are those who argue, Nick, that this is a band-aid. Yes, it may provide financing to developing countries, but it does not, in essence, address the issue, which is global warming. Do you agree with those who hold that view, or do you think it all contributes?
Really, it depends on what kind of view you want to give it. I think what is there is that some of these are already embedded in the Paris Agreement, for example. And if they are embedded in the Paris Agreement, it therefore follows, for example, that if it is carbon trade, then we have to engage. Article 6 stipulates so, yeah, particularly paragraph 2 and paragraph 4. Paragraph 4, yeah. So there are pros and cons. Let me say so. Pitfalls are there as well. You get it? Because the argument is the global atmosphere is shared. So it doesn't matter where the carbon emissions happen or where the reduction happens. Yeah, it all contributes either to increasing or reducing it. Therefore, the question that comes in, if it can be done somewhere cheaply, for example, then why don't we do it there so that you achieve more? However, there are pitfalls. And these pitfalls, from a person like myself who come from a civil society, is what we want to address. Yeah, we are concerned about. For example, we have a binding goal on Paris Agreement as provided for in Article 2.1a, which states that every party, that's every country that is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, should make its own contribution to achieving the desired kind of global warming, or well below 2 degrees Celsius. So the implication of engaging in carbon trading is this. There's what they call corresponding adjustment. Is that if a country is buying carbon credits from, say, Kenya, for example, it means that there will be an adjustment on the Kenyan side, that whatever carbon they captured or sequestered or reduced, yeah, they subtract from the inventory. It is counted on the other country. It means that, therefore, collectively, at the end of the day, we are not contributing as desired to achieve that goal. However, having said that, when you look at it, there is also an argument which is ethical in nature, that we are allowing the polluters to continue polluting as long as they can pay for what they consider as very cheap carbon credits from developing countries, and therefore enhancing that unequal power relation that has existed between the polluters, which are the developed countries, and the least polluting countries, which are the developing countries like Kenya. So when you look at it from those perspectives, then you come to question that this is not morally correct, and it is not really contributing to that desired ambitious kind of mitigation to achieve the Paris Agreement goal.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Fred, your proposal is a climate damages tax to be imposed on, for instance, those fossil fuel companies. Is that the position you hold?
Yeah, we've done calculations and found out that, imposing a carbon damages tax, raises about $900 billion US dollars up to 2030. Essentially, if you look at the design of the new collective and quantified goal, there are proposals there to actually introduce innovative sources of finance. And I must applaud Kenya is part of the Global Solidarity Levy. That's one of the solutions. France, Barbados, and Kenya, have brought in other countries into that arrangement where, they think around how do we raise revenues to to tackle climate crisis, and how do we, build momentum for countries to join into that coalition, essentially, and as a source of, innovative source of finance. It means that we are not going for, additional loans. If you look at the African continent, predominantly we are squeezed in terms of our debt crisis. And, the global markets where we're getting loans, it's becoming increasingly expensive. So how do we think outside the box and ensure that we raise the money that is required and we don't put pressure on the macroeconomic stability of our countries where we have, limited domestic resources, limited taxes to raise for climate action. So there are all these proposals on the table, certainly being supported by countries like the European Union and others. But of course, most of the developed countries are quite much against it, simply because, it's, they are the highest, industrialized countries, and they are supposed to pay those taxes.
All right. Thank you for that contribution. I'll have to end the conversation therefore tonight, but we will pick it up on the hits and misses that come out of Baku. It continues to the 22nd of November. But we've had with us, joining us virtually from Baku, Azerbaijan, that is Fred Njehu, who is a Pan-African political strategist for Greenpeace Africa. I've also had in studio from Christian Aid, their global program resilience advisor, Nicholas Abuya. Thank you so very much, gentlemen, for joining me tonight. We take a break on Citizen Weekend, but coming up,